John McClain told the Los Angeles Times, "I'm not the kind of guy who needs to take a survey to figure out whether a song is good or not. I'm a musician." I'm back here with the gear, and I'm ready to give you my remembrances of John McClain, co-executor of the Michael Jackson estate, appointed to that position by Michael himself prior to his death, obviously. I knew John McClain, met him shortly after I moved to LA, but I'm going to save my personal interactions with him for later, because I want to talk about him first. This is about John McClain and remembering him because I admired him and I thought he was a remarkable individual. Even before he wound up being named co-executor of the Michael Jackson estate, which is a job I wouldn't want. The responsibility would just crush a normal human being. John was a friend of the Jacksons, a family friend from the 60s when they were all going to Fairfax High School, not all of them, but John was in the same class as Jermaine Jackson. You know, we all know that Jermaine played bass and covered James Jamerson's bass lines when they played live, but Jermaine also played guitar. And John, as you can see, was a guitar player. He also played keys and synthesizers. But so it'd be perfectly natural for them to strike up a friendship. I mean, all of my friends from high school were musicians. They would have been a year behind Tito. We'd say, according to the rules of American public schools, if you're a senior in high school, Tito and I would have been in the same class. John McClain and Jermaine Jackson would have been juniors, and normally the strict caste system of high school etiquette is you're not allowed to even acknowledge the existence of underclassmen unless they happen to be a really good-looking girl, and then you're allowed to ask them out. Anyway, John came from a wealthy family. And I think that put him in a position where the Jacksons could feel comfortable with him. So this friendship went on for a long time. John became a studio musician, playing guitar, played on records by Gladys Knight and Lionel Richie and others. You know, he was just beginning as a studio musician and was well respected and getting lots of calls. And then, I'm not sure all the details to this because it's not, you know, I knew John, but it's not like we were on the same bowling team or anything. But what happened is, the next thing that I knew is that I heard that John had been invited to head the black music department at A&M Records and all the subsidiaries that were affiliated with A&M Records, which was very cool. It took me by surprise because my whole focus was me, my music, and that applies for just about anybody trying to get over in the record business in the early 80s or prior to that, you know, anytime. You're doing your best to, you know, consumed with the belief that your music deserves to be heard, whether it does or not, you know, that it's hard to say. But I was kind of surprised when John moved to the other side of the desk. And I think it was a very savvy thing, and it speaks to his intelligence, because I think it's a lot more sustainable over there and can easily be just as lucrative, and you don't have people bothering you when you go to the grocery store. So John sets up at A&M Records on their lot. That was back when A&M had bought the old Chaplin Studios, which later became the Jim Henson Studios. I'll put up a picture of him. And one of the first things he did there is he was the one who paired Janet Jackson with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. And we're all fortunate that he did that, because Janet had done 2 albums on A&M, and they were both kind of bubblegum. You know, Janet was just coming out of you know, her teenage years with the sitcoms and everything, but the albums were. It was time for her to make a grown-up record, just as much as her brothers did when they switched from Motown to CBS, and it's time to drop the 5, and now we're just the Jacksons, and we're adults. So he paired Janet with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who were fresh out of the School of Prince in Minneapolis and loaded with that fun Minneapolis sound that we all loved. And well, you know the rest with Janet. I mean, the album Control and Rhythm Nation, it just really changed her entire career. John was at A&M, and I lost touch with him because I was off doing things, he was doing things. Later, he went to, he was working with Interscope with Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre and all that. I mean, John was what they call a record man, very respected record man. One of these days, I'm going to do a video on these people because they're unsung. They don't get the attention they should. People like John Hammond, Ahmet Erdogan, Jerry Wexler, Clive Davis, who is still with us and is maybe the last of his breed. I did some work for Clive. Then the next thing I know, the tragedy strikes. Michael is gone. And following the news after this, I'm away from it. I didn't know, was long out of touch with anybody in the family. And then I see that when the will comes to light, Michael had named his longtime music business attorney, John Branca, and John McClain as the executors of his estate. Not a family member, but these two people who he trusted very well. John Branca was probably his if it was the godfather, he's the consigliere. And John McClain was a good fit because, Michael had known him since the late 60s, and Michael knew that he was a talented musician and would balance out the legal brain and musical brain. And Michael knew what he was doing when he did that. It was a good choice. And I think that the estate has done well. They've shortly after the death, they come up with This Is It film, Cirque du Soleil, Michael Jackson Ones, which is still running in Vegas, MJ the Musical, which is playing in Broadway, and now this motion picture, Michael, which John McClain is not only an executive producer, but one of the producers, and he was one of the creative forces, saying, no, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. And if you followed that film, you know that they stopped, they rescheduled, they reshot material, and they're very careful about how they presented it. So a lot of success with the estate, even though generally a lot of times MJ fans tend to gripe about the estate. Why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? Well, you don't know how many things they're juggling at any time. So now I'll tell you how I know John McClain, and if that doesn't interest you, you can just click off now. But I find it interesting because I got to know this guy. Shortly after I moved to Los Angeles, I got myself a job at Guitar Center on Sunset Boulevard. I figured that'd be a good place to meet people, and it really was. And John McClain was a regular fixture there. All the salesmen knew him because he was a tough negotiator. Every time he came, he'd have a different car. He had this Duesenberg replica that was like one of the most head-turning cars. You see a Maserati pull up, oh, that's John, or a super clean Mercedes, And the salesmen were irritated because he wanted the very best deal he could get. It didn't matter. He said, don't worry about what I'm driving. Don't worry about how much money I have. I'm not buying anything unless I know that I'm getting the best possible deal. He was a tough negotiator, and I respected him for that. He was interested in synthesizers. He came back into the keyboard department. We got to know each other. I demo stuff for him, and he'd heard about this was the new thing, and that was the new thing. Prophet 5, Oberheim, 8 Voice, all the, I can't remember what all I sold him. It was always a long, drawn out negotiation until I'd have to say, John, they're not going to let me sell it any cheaper. But super, you can see this is super intelligent guy he was. And then one time I heard him pick up a guitar and just try it out, and he starts playing these lightning fast John McLaughlin style licks, just for a second. I go, just enough that I could see as a musician, this guy's for real. Okay, and I had more respect for him. So that was my interacting with him at Guitar Center, and then I went on years past. I started working with Stevie Wonder, got the call to do the 81 Jackson's Triumph Tour, working as a session musician with Michael on Thriller and Say, then getting my own deal. All that is on this channel. All those, you've heard all those stories, or if you haven't, come on, click on the channel. So a lot of time went by, and when I produced Vanity, if you've watched that video, you know that that put a little speed bump in my career, but I didn't stop. I started, the phone quit ringing and phone calls didn't get returned. And it's not good to have a record fail if it's really high profile. Don't spend $1 million promoting a failure. Thank you very much. After the Vanity record, I had to go independent. And I found a group and signed them to my production company. The name was Notes from the Underground. And we started recording some stuff. This was a boy band before there even were boy bands, not much of them anyway. And so we're doing this stuff. And of course the whole point is to get them a deal. So I called John, he was at A&M, and I said, I'm producing this boy band, and I think you'd like to hear it. And he said, yeah. And he gave me an appointment to come in and see him. I went and saw him on the Chaplin lot, and we had a meeting, and he liked what he heard. He didn't go as far as I wanted. I wanted an album deal. He said, look, I'll give you a 12-inch deal, and we'll see how it goes from there. And a 12-inch deal back then meant that they're going to do a two-sided 12-inch dance mix. Send that out to the clubs and see how it does. And that happened, and we did that. And it was sent out to the clubs, and I don't know. I'll play you just a little bit of what the single was. I still like it. You know what? When I'm done with this, I'll let that song play us out, and maybe later I'll do another video about the group and how that didn't work out. I can make a playlist of all my failures. It wasn't a failure. It was a good record. It's just no es fácil, pero tampoco difícil. So that was the last time I interacted with John, and I really appreciated that he took the time, even though, I assume, and I can't remember because this is like, I don't know, 86, 87 maybe, I'm not even sure of the year. Might have even been as late as 1988. But I'm assuming that he had heard my work with Solar, because he was in tight with the whole Solar guys. He had he worked with the Silvers and I mean, John was all over the music business, and no one knew him. So anyway, he was familiar with the Wolf album, this and that, the other. So there was a modicum of mutual respect. We were colleagues, And I was always grateful to him for giving me a chance with that. And then the next thing I know, he's, you know, I lost touch with him. Things go on, you know, I went on. And then the next thing I know, it's after Michael had died, and the news comes of who's going to run the estate. And I go, well, good choice. A very good choice. John McClain was whip smart, super talented musician. He was calm. He had a demeanor that he exuded confidence and intelligence, but quietly. He was firm on what he wanted and what he was trying to achieve, but he was also quiet about it. And I just have loads and loads of respect for the guy, and that's why I wanted to do this. Not to say, look at me, I used to know, you know, the guy who just died that was Michael Jackson's co-executor. It's just, he was like I've said before, a truly remarkable man. A lot of skill and the intelligence to say, maybe I'll take the other side of the desk. That's quite amazing to me, because he could have gone the other way. But I was really sorry to hear that he had died. The fact that he turned the motion picture Michael, not alone, but he and the studio and everybody who worked on the film, that's become the highest grossing musical biopic of all time. And Michael would have been well pleased by that, because you know Michael, he didn't do things small. So there it is, John McClain. There he is. That's how I remember him. This photo was taken in 1998 at his home in Malibu. And he looks just the same as the last time I saw him in 1988. So there you go. I don't look the same as I did in 1988. Yes, such is life, so it goes. That's it. So enough of me. I wanted to talk about John McClain, and I have, you see. And now you know. So until we meet again, I bid you a fond farewell. Good evening.